Bucket would have been. The funny thing is, Charlie Bucket had been alive now. He would like have gauged ears and been listening to like Korn and shit, and like, I've got the golden ticket. Since the quarantine's been started, we were talking about this earlier. I've been watching tons of documentaries about like early 2000s Midwest metalcore bands. And they're just so, because they're all like the full sentence band names. The guys who are like, suicide is what happens when the fire burns out. Like, you remember those bands? Yeah. And all of like that like weird Ohio screamo trend that was like huge for like from like 2006 to 2010. Oh god. Like there was a band and it would have like 4 guitarists
all just playing all ages venues that used to be churches.
Yeah, all ages venues that used to be churches. And then for like 4 years, those guys were just getting laid like fucking crazy, and like Warner Brothers was like, "Here's $600,000," and then it was just like over instantly.
Of course,
and then and then you watch the documentaries, and half of the guys are like history teachers that have tattoos. They're like English teachers and then the other half of them are guys who are like, "Yeah, I'm in like 12 bands, and I own like 4 record labels," and like the way you can tell if someone in a band is like gonna be the first guy to die is if in the documentary he's the guy who's drinking out of a red Solo cup during his interview, you know, and he's like wearing sunglasses during the interview.
Tony Samadi died 5 minutes after this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You sounding good? You wouldn't know yet. You don't have the headphones.
Yeah.
All right, we got to start talking about it.
Yeah.
Here we go. All right. Americans love superheroes. We're in danger of running out of hunks because they've all been cast as Windman or Aqualad or whatever. Superheroes show us how we feel about ourselves. Are we a badass anti-hero like Wolverine or an anti-hero badass like the Punisher? We love them so much we're even willing to watch a DC movie if it's on in the background while we're doing dishes. But there's one superhero who defines the idea of a superhero to the point that they almost have the same name, Superman. Superman is the definitive superhero, which makes him the boilerplate for a uniquely American art form. He invented everything from the cape to the secret identity. He is synonymous with America, despite the fact that there is a literal Captain America. But who invented Superman? Why do Americans love him? Is any of this going to involve a half-blind Cleveland Jew drawing bondage pornography? Up in the sky, it's a bird, it's a plane, capable of being ignored by thousands of people in a single bound, more time-consuming than an actual job. It's Kings of Democracy Podcast. Woo! All right. Hey, everybody, and welcome to Kings of Democracy Podcast, the podcast that explains the people, places, and things of American life. I am, as always, your host, Andrew Merklinghouse, and I am joined today by my very special guest and superhero mega enthusiast, probably some superhero secret identity, Mr. Henry Russell Stoddard, everybody.
Oh, hello, everybody. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
Oh, yeah. Well, I've been on yours, so you have to be on mine more than once, apparently.
It is the quid pro quo, unspoken rule of podcasting.
That is the rule of the podcast mafia. It's like, you know that no Sicilian man can refuse to be on a podcast on the day of his daughter's wedding.
Yes.
So just a couple of notes going on here. Jerry and Claire will be away for a bit. They're both kind of staying away from other people during this whole thing. You know, they both have very legitimate reasons to be, but me and Henry live together now. Yeah. So we've just been spitting each other's mouths for a week now.
That's my favorite activity since you moved in. Fucking global pandemic.
Yeah, fucking pussy, not wanting to watch his parents fucking die of a disease he gave them. Yeah.
Fair.
Yeah, well, you know, he lives with his folks, and his folks are older, and, you know,
I would be, yeah. That was the same reason my mom at the onset of this whole thing was like, come live in Idaho with us. And I'm like,
no, because I'm the most likely person to get
from
you
a
sick.
Hotbed. Your husband works at a hospital.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm not trying to give it to you.
Yeah,
also.
exactly. Yeah. And that being said, we just released an episode, the one I did with Elliot GB, which blew up, has hands down far and away been our most successful episode. And I have to give a huge shout out to the Coast Guard for supporting the shit out of this episode.
Our boys in gray. What's their color?
Orange. Our boys in orange, yeah.
Oh, because they're on the aircraft carrier.
Yeah,
waving.
dude. Yeah, dude. You guys are real as shit. I want to thank you guys so much for all the support and love and engagement you've been giving us. I got a few direct messages. I got a couple on Reddit from a guy named, his Reddit name was like Hendrickson, but it had numbers in it. And just a quick point of correction, he was right. So in the Coast Guard episode, I said that the Coast Guard automatically becomes part of the military when war is declared. That's not true. The Coast Guard can be transferred to the military at the request of the president or Congress, but they don't automatically do that. And they are always a uniformed service. There's 8 uniformed services in the government. I think it's 9 now, counting Space Force. But the Coast Guard is always one of those. So they're always technically in the military, but they're a part of the military that isn't in the Department of Defense. They're in the Department of Homeland Security. So kind of a very minor.
Like why?
Huh?
Like a Y being a vowel, like sometimes.
Yeah. It's like Y being a vowel. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Except they are always a vowel. Because the Coast Guard, those guys get shot at. They do real ass shit all the fucking time. They're fucking putting it on the line for the safety of, our sandbars and making sure we don't get to do cocaine. Keeping us safe from awesome parties. So,
Diplo shows.
Yeah. And then also, we got in touch with another kid coming into us from Reddit by the username of Shrek Testicle.
He's my favorite already.
Dude. And he was messaging me. We were talking. He's joining up the Coast Guard in September, and he's going out for rescue swimmer, which is elite as shit. And we just want to give a shout out to Shrek Testicle saying, you can do it. We believe in you. This whole podcast is rooting for you, which means me and like my mom and then a couple of Jerry's exes.
Yeah.
And then a bunch of drunk 30-year-old women who thought this was Kings of Leon. But we are rooting for you. Shrek Testicle, you are
Your Shreks is on fire.
Yeah. You are our unlimited patriot beyond the max of the month. And keep us updated on how it goes. And when you become a rescue swimmer, we'll send you something. Like, I don't know.
Send them a copy of the Ashton Kutcher, Kevin Costner movie where they're rescue divers. I can't remember what it's called.
So everyone just, I guess, pray for Shrek Testicle as he prepares for his endeavors into the world of being an elite as shit Dark Forces Special Ops Commando.
Yeah,
All
Dark
right.
Force.
Hell yeah. So yeah, we're talking about Superman here. What are your base level Superman feelings, Henry? Because I know you're a comic book guy.
Yeah, no, I mean you just moved in. You saw the
you own actual comic books.
Yes, you might notice there's not a fucking one Superman comic in there.
Yeah.
He's just so like, I don't know. We were talking about this a little bit off mic. Like, he's the most impossible superhero to write for because he's God. Like you can't write a compelling Superman story because it'd be like reading a story about Zeus going and getting groceries. Like him on a mission, he's God. It's impossible. And
well, I mean, Superman also just really reeks of like a much earlier era of popular culture where there wasn't a lot of subtlety and things or nuance yet. You know,
his villains are also kind of like I get that Lex Luthor being without power is like a foil to the fact that he is God, but also like the original reason in the comics why Lex Luthor hates Batman or Superman is because he in some way blames a lab explosion that was resulting in him going bald. So that was the original reason Lex hates fucking Superman.
Hell yeah.
Because he made him go bald.
Dude, I would be mad at someone if they made me go bald.
Yeah, but if that guy had also like saved a bunch of kids in Crete, like I'd be like, oh no.
All right, so let's get talking about Superman here. Superman came about in the 1930s, which comic book historians refer to as the golden age of comics. Which is weird because it was kind of the shittiest age of comics. It was very simple and very poorly drawn and like not interesting, but I don't know, I guess it's...
Yeah, I mean, it's the first iteration of something. It was like, oh, wow. Yeah,
but usually the first iteration isn't the best.
No, never.
Comics were a pretty new innovation and mostly limited to newspapers because newspapers came out every day and paper is cheap. So why not draw like a dog sharing a bean with a hobo? You know, it's not a particularly artistically deep well. The first comic book to be sold independent of a newspaper appeared in 1934 in the form of Famous Funnies. And in order to rip off the success, a man named Malcolm Wheeler Nicholson started National Allied Publications. And the only interesting thing I could find out about Malcolm is that he had a feud against the army because he'd been kicked out of the cavalry, which is a very like fancy thing to get kicked out of.
Yeah. Was that when it was still horses, or were they like?
Yeah, this was like still horses. Like, well, no, by 1930 they probably had cars. Maybe he wanted to go back to the horses.
Yeah.
They were like driving around cars, and he was like, "Yeah, sure, it goes faster, and it doesn't need grass, and it won't kick you off, and it doesn't."
Our major misstep in World War I. Not enough horses.
Not enough horses. See, if we had just put 100 horses in front of us, the horses would have absorbed the bullets.
They would have gotten the gas because they're lower down. They breathe the gas before it gets to you.
And horses are immune to gas.
Yes.
I assume.
They smell bad.
They poop out the gas. We throw the gas back at them.
Yes.
But Malcolm's goal was simple. He just wanted to buy up the rights to existing comics and then just republish them. But he found all the existing...
Early fat Jewish.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, but he paid for it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
all right.
yeah,
So not the fat Jewish.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Is that guy still around?
He was in Uncut Gems.
Oh, yeah, he was.
Yeah, he's in the Seder scene.
Yeah, well, you know, I mean...
Sandler, you know so many talented Jews.
But no, there's only like 5 Jewish actors.
Yeah.
That was sarcasm.
That's
There's like
true.
thousands of Jewish actors.
I was like, wait, what?
It's as
It's Dustin Hoffman.
I started researching an episode on the history of Hollywood, and then I was like, I literally just have to do an episode about how the Jews built Hollywood because it's literally true, and they did a very good job.
There's a difference though between saying the Jews built Hollywood and the Jews control Hollywood.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, because you control something you build,
like
and
the Romans built the Colosseum.
Yeah,
control the Colosseum. Like they control.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, and now it's changing, but they very much do. And actually, Jewish control of the media will feature prominently in this episode. It'll be very interesting. Yeah. But anyway, Malcolm Wheeler, a Gentile, he is not Jewish. He had a genius idea. He would just make his own comics and release them. So in 1935, he released New Fun Comics, which made decent enough money. Okay. And he established another important first in the comics industry, screwed his artists over, didn't pay them. So... As anyone who has ever worked in an artistic field can testify, it is super hard to get paid for work.
I remember to the point where like I booked you on a show and it was like paid a level that we don't normally get paid. You're like, I'll do it for free. I'll do it. I'm like, don't be a scab, dickhead. We're undervalued criminally. Get your money, bitch.
Well, I remember I got in a lot of trouble on the Seattle Comedians Facebook group because I would see like a gig and I would see people bitching about how like, I'm not doing that for less than $100. And I'm like, I'll do it for 25. And then people would get mad at me. And I'm like, dude, I'm just trying to work, you know?
Yep.
I'm trying to get paid $25 to do 15 minutes worth of work at something I love and good at. Yeah. And you're bad at it. And you're saying you won't do it for less than 100. Go fuck yourself.
It's amazing how often those people get $100 though.
Yeah. But Malcolm had 2 major problems. The first was that he was terrible at business and constantly on the verge of going bankrupt. And the second was the problem of finding quality original comics. And it's at this point that Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster enter the story. So Joe and Jerry.
Schuster. I thought his name was
Schuster.
Yeah.
I might be saying it wrong.
You're saying it right. I kept getting him mixed up with the dude who directed the bad Batman. Like I always.
Oh, Joel Schumacher.
Schumacher. Yeah.
Joe and Jerry had been an artistic duo since they like met in high school. And Jerry was the writer and Joe was the artist. And they had bonded over their love of science fiction back when that meant something.
Yes.
Like back when you had to fucking bleed for it, you know? Yeah. We both remember the tail end of nerd culture being legitimately underground.
Yeah.
And like that's why I fucking hate pop culture podcasts, and I really hated that whole like nerd culture thing.
Yeah, it was kind of not. I'm kitschy and nerd, and like how can we commodify it?
Yeah. Well, it's like there's this weird thing where it's like only certain elements of it become popular, and it's usually stuff that's like directly related to like big franchises that are popping off. Because there's still stuff that like when people are like, "Oh, I'm super into nerd culture," it's like, okay. Do you like Warhammer 4000? Because that's deep nerd shit. Like there's
you paint those trolls.
Yeah. Because there's like deep nerd shit that is still wildly unpopular and like gross and like I think there was a lot of that very toxic backlash against like nerd girls, gamer girls kind of thing, which is very toxic and gross. But like I remember being when I was like in high school and like playing Magic the Gathering in like the cafeteria, and just the idea of any woman not thinking that this was stupid as fuck. Never like the idea to me of any woman not instantly thinking everything I did was stupid as fuck
True.
was just like an impossibility.
Yes.
So then now you get older and there's like hot chicks who are like, I think Star Wars is pretty cool. And you're like, well, guess what? I bled for it. And you're like, everyone's always okay with everything you did. But I had to like physically fucking hide copies of like Shadows of the Empire under my fucking parka because I didn't want kids on the volleyball team to see it. And, you know, and this is the 30s when these guys are into like science fiction. So this is back when like your life is kind of legitimately in danger.
Yes.
And Joe and Jerry were both very shy and nerdy guys, and it really shows in their art. Joe, the artist, he had a fascination with bodybuilders and like the perfect human form.
Okay.
Because he was like a very scrawny guy, so he would just like draw like super muscular men constantly.
Okay.
Which we will later discover might have a kind of some weird implications.
Sure.
Jerry Jerry, the writer, he actually originally wanted to be a journalist. And one of the reasons he made Clark Kent, Superman, a journalist, and he was so interested in journalism was because journalists have an excuse to talk to women.
Whoa, buddy.
Which is really sad, but that's also really sweet.
Yeah, I guess.
Because that's one of the things, this is legit true.
Now I'm just imagining at the end of like any Clark Kent interview, he like, before he meets Lois, he's like, so what are you doing after this?
Yeah. But it's like, it's because anytime you talk to a woman you don't know, you are by definition being an imposition.
Yeah.
Like you are barging in. And like if you're socially aware, you can do it in a way that falls within the social contract.
Yes.
But if you're like a scrawny nerd in the 30s, like, and you just like, what I am, it just feels bad every time. But if you're a journalist, you can be like, excuse me, ma'am, I'm writing a story about the most beautiful woman in the world. And off the record, do you know where she might be? You know,
negging in the 30s. I love it.
Yeah. Something like that, you
Yeah.
know, but it's kind of sweet that he was like, oh, if I was a journalist, I could talk to girls.
Yeah,
That's
I get that.
Yeah.
I don't think of it in a malicious way. I think of it more in like hands held at the front and like kicking rocks. Like,
Yeah.
I wish I could talk to cute, sweet ladies.
Yeah. Well, but also, likewise, Joe and Jerry were the children of Jewish immigrants. And in those days, it wasn't uncommon for Jews to sort of compartmentalize their lives where they weren't Jewish in public, but they were Jewish at home, sort of like having a separate identity that is less well known to the public. A secret identity.
All right.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
And it's also very interesting because Superman is one of the big superheroes created by Jews. And, you know, like to get into the whole Kill Bill thing, Superman is who Superman really is. Clark Kent is the thing he makes up.
Yes.
So, like, for them, like, Superman is their Jewishness. They're always Jewish. Jewish is who they are. But Clark Kent is the lie. Right? Like, you know the whole thing in Kill Bill where Superman is Superman, Clark Kent is the character he makes up.
Okay. I thought that sounded familiar. I was like,
I'm not that clever.
Yeah, okay, I'm like, damn, you're dropping some heat.
Yeah,
and I was also too baked the last time I watched Kill Bill.
But Bruce Wayne is Bruce Wayne. He becomes Batman. Yeah. But so, and it's interesting because that's the dynamic for every other superhero except Superman. Everyone involved in the first 50 years of comics is Jewish. Usually first generation Jewish immigrants from New York. And this is the thing that like I think I've talked about a couple times on this podcast is how minorities dominate new fields. So like, you know, Gentiles controlled like the radio.
Yeah.
So when comics started to pop off, all the people who were like Jewish and good at telling stories were like, hey, I can work here. You know, it's why like all the nail salons are owned by Vietnamese people. Is because like nail salon started to be a thing and they were like, oh, hey, I can do this and then I'll get my cousin a job. You know, when a new field pops off, everyone who's already making money in a field, they don't go into a new risky field.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That so it's why minorities dominate new fields that pop off. Yeah, it's something that happens a lot in America. Yeah. It's why all the early movie studios were owned by Jews was because all the theaters and radios were owned by Gentiles. So then they were like, hey, I can just go into movies. It's an op because I'm never going to get ahead in radio. I'm never going to get ahead in theater, but there's a new thing where I can get ahead. Now, clearly, Superman had a lot of roots in their desire to explore sort of a perfect version of themselves, like an ideal version who's like strong and charismatic and accepted. Yeah. And they had been kicking the idea around since 1933 in a short story called The Reign of Superman. The story was about a bald hobo named Bill Dunn who is tricked into taking an experimental drug which gives him psychic superpowers, which he abuses until it wears off and then he becomes a hobo again.
Okay.
So different take.
So it's like little flowers for Algernon.
Yes, yeah, it's a little flowers
okay,
for
I
Algernon.
like that.
But where Algernon is like, no, you will hurt. The duo drew up a prototype comic, but it was rejected by everyone. Jerry started to think he wasn't getting anywhere because he was young and unknown, prompting him to look for a more established artist to replace Joe. And this is really hard for me because, you know, my usual co-host is Jerry. And so I keep on getting worried that Jerry's going to hear this. And he's like, yes, I'm not going anywhere because I'm shackled to Andrew.
Oh, that's not a bad place to be.
Yeah. That was the name of my band.
Shackled to Andrew.
Yeah. And this resulted in Joe burning the first full-length Superman comic in protest.
Oh, no.
Yeah,
so it's like completely lost to time.
So, Jerry, if you leave the show, I will destroy the masters of this. Jerry worked on Superman alone for a while with no luck, and then he eventually reconciled with Joe, so they got back together. This version of Superman was much different. He was a human from the future who was sent back in time just before the Earth was destroyed. Okay. He couldn't fly. He could just jump really high. And he didn't have laser vision or frost breath or see-through walls. He was just basically a really strong dude.
Okay.
So in 1935, Joe and Jerry started selling other stories they had written to Allied National.
Yes.
The guy who got kicked out of the cavalry. And after they had some success with other stories, they showed Superman to Malcolm, right? Yeah. And he was like, this is actually really cool. But then they kind of took it back and they were like, we don't want you to publish this because Allied National was like constantly on the verge of bankruptcy. And Superman was like their baby. And they wanted to save it for a publication with like wider distribution.
Okay, cool.
So it's weird they showed it to him in the first place. I guess they were like, check out this awesome thing that we will never let you publish.
But we will give you Geranium Boy.
Yeah. You got to tease them. You got to make them want it.
Yeah.
You know? So in 1936, Malcolm was in such bad shape that he reached out to a strange power couple in the world of publishing, Jack Leibowitz and Harry Donefeld. Jack was a simple accountant, while Harry was a bit more colorful. Harry had immigrated from Romania at age 5 and spent his youth in Lower East Side Jewish street gangs looking for a quick, easy way out.
Oh, I like this guy already.
Yeah, dude. So in 1920, Harry went to work for his brother's printing press, and he was this really like fast-talking, fun-living, like, you know, make a deal at the strip club kind of guy.
Okay.
So he was able to really grow his publishing company by smuggling liquor for Frank Costello inside shipments of paper pulp.
That's tight.
Yeah, dude. So he's like criminal ties.
Ah, okay.
He's like just like he knows everyone. He's always at the fucking strip club. He's always giving people money. He's like, it's Harry Donefeld here.
All right.
We're friends. Then he forced his own brothers out of the publishing company and then renamed it and started cranking out cheap girly mags.
Oh.
So renaming something is the ultimate power move.
Yeah.
That is why, like, when the Vietnamese, you know, fucking overran fucking Saigon, they renamed it Ho Chi Minh City. It's because like that is the move. You rename something, it's like, nah, now you are bitch.
It is now Oz.
Yeah. Did a comic that we both mutually know? He was dating this girl who had been in a relationship with a guy he knew that he did not like particularly much, and they moved in together, and he renamed all of her cats.
What?
Yeah.
Off mic, I'm gonna have to know more details. But what?
Yeah, he just started calling the cats by different names,
move?
And they started responding to completely different names.
Oh my god!
And so he would come over to be like, oh, and pet the key because he had like shared custody of the cats, and they wouldn't respond to the names he gave them anymore, which is like a weird form of like sexual colonialism.
Yeah, that feels weird.
I'm fucking your girl, and I renamed your cats.
Definitely a lot like planting a flag there.
Yeah. But that's Anyway, so Harry and Jack lent Malcolm some money, and they formed a new company together called Detective Comics Incorporated in order to fund a comic book called Detective Comics that was about detectives. Yes. And that one was kind of successful, but in January of 1938, Malcolm took a vacation to come up with some new ideas for the series, and he came home and discovered that the locks on his office door had been changed. So while he was on vacation, Harry had sued him for non-payment, gotten a judge buddy of his to declare the company bankrupt, seized its assets, and then put them up for like public auction. And then Harry was the only bidder on it. Malcolm went back to his old job, which was writing bad adventure novels and criticizing the U.S. military for kicking him out.
Okay.
So Harry and Jack started to work on a new idea called Action Comics, and they needed material.
Yeah.
So they pulled a Superman story that Joe and Jerry had written out of the slush pile, which is a publishing term for the massive heap of unsolicited material that everyone has lying around.
Yes.
It's where like all of our screenplays are. It's where my Brooklyn Nine-Nine spec script that I wrote during the fucking quarantine pandemic is.
Of course.
Yeah. I really liked this one.
Yeah.
I wrote a Brooklyn Nine-Nine spec script that was just about the fucking opioid crisis.
Jesus
and like
Christ.
about like fentanyl taking over.
Is it like a very Pimento heavy episode? The whatever is Jason Mantzoukas character?
No, I should have put Pimento in it,
Yeah.
dude. No, it was just about them learning to Narcan people.
Okay.
And then I was like, dude, if they make this episode, people will learn how to Narcan people. Yeah.
Good God.
So Jack and Harry thought the story was sort of stupid, but they liked the cover of Superman picking up the car. You've seen the Action Comics.
Yeah, no, I used to have a Christmas ornament.
Yeah. They offered to publish it, and Joe and Jerry accepted, and they were tired of rejection. They had been working on Superman for 6 years, and this was the only solid offer that they had received.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, 6 years of like, and this wasn't like their private bedroom project.
Yeah.
They were sending
Shopping.
this out. Yeah.
Damn.
And they'd had deals fall through, so they were like, fuck it. And they sold it for $130, which is
Wait, like
$2,000
rights and shit?
rights and everything.
Oh.
$2,300. Yep. They signed a contract giving the rights to Superman away for $2,300, which I have $2,300.
I have $2,300 at this point.
Yeah.
Wow.
You know those checks that the president was kind enough to send us all for being poor?
You could buy the Clark Kent half of Superman for that.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone's like, dude, this is not enough money to not starve to death on. That's half of Superman. Action Comics #1 hit shelves on April 18th, 1938, and sales were good. The first run of 200,000 sold out pretty quickly, so it's decent success. Success. Nobody knew it at the time, but the 10-cent comic book would one day become one of the most valuable pieces of pop culture memorabilia ever.
God, those things. Do you know how much one is
$3
going?
million. They've gone for $3 million. Yeah, a mint will go for $3 million.
Yeah, man.
This is a great story. In 2010, a family was packing up their house for foreclosure and found a copy of it, and it was like a really beat up copy sold for $400,000. Yeah. There's only like 30 known copies of it, and every once in a while a new copy will show up, but it's usually pretty beat up. Or Detective Comics Incorporated, which published Action Comics, they were kind of weirded out by the success. The first issue sold 200,000, and then they were selling 1 million by the fourth. And they're like, why are we so successful? So Harry walked down to a newsstand and he asked a kid why he was buying Action Comics, and the kid just said, because this one has Superman in it.
Damn,
But he said it in like the 1920s street kid voice. He was like, because this one's got Superman in it, sir.
Yeah, sir, this one's got Superman in it.
Now, excuse me, I'm off to my job as a newsie. And
which is actually more dancing than delivering newspapers.
I'm also working as a strike breaker because the Wobblies, they're on strike down at the shipyard. The fifth graders, they're not going into the coal miners, so they're bringing in third graders.
I'm actually the canary they put in the canaries are striking, so they put a fifth grader in there.
I was a lieutenant in the Civil War when I was 2 years old.
Good.
Hell yeah. Superman was a breakout star. Superman, like many Americans at the time, was an immigrant. He was from a foreign place, but he was successfully fitting in and people liked him. So if you're an immigrant...
Assimilation.
But Superman's also like, he's assimilated, but he's also still... People want him. They like him. They need him, you know? Superman also came at a pretty good time in American history, by which I mean a very fucking depressing time, the Great Depression.
Yes.
A lot of people who study sort of like American popular literature note that the Depression was sort of the end of like the Horatio Alger story of like determined people succeeding through like hard work and optimism.
Sure.
Because like during the Depression, everyone got fucking annihilated. Yeah.
And they were not getting better monthly unemployment.
Yeah, exactly.
To the point where they make more on unemployment than they do at their job. What up? That's me right
now.
Yeah.
But it was sort of like, you remember like during the recession, that was sort of the birth of the like scam entrepreneur.
Oh, yeah.
The social, like during the recession, it was like, believe in your dreams. Now, crisis is an opportunity. All you need to do is tell me your social security number. I have a Lamborghini. Look at how hot my wife is, but don't look that close because she's definitely not a cardboard cutout. I made $75 million selling used dental gold to Brazil. So just tell me your social security number and we will all get rich. Yeah. But like for the only people who were like optimistic during the recession were like fucking scammers.
Yeah.
And then like during the depression, we were too dignified to pretend to be entrepreneurs on social media.
Yes.
So no one was optimistic. But so Superman's just raw power, right? He's just you can't cut his hair. That's how powerful he is, right? And when you're a child growing up in the Depression, seeing your father, and your father is always the strongest man you will ever know, humiliated like day in and day out, Superman's a really powerful symbol, you know?
For sure.
So this was the peak of the golden age of comics. Detective Comics, now known by their initials, DC. What? That's what it stands for. Yeah. They were doing very well, cranking out movies, radio shows, a daily run newspaper strip, and basically every piece of merchandise known to man. Joe and Jerry were given free range to write Superman in any way they wanted. They stole a lot of ideas very close to home. Superman was modeled on a lot of movie stars. They like kind of stole the face and the body from all over. Lois Lane was based on a model who Jerry ended up marrying.
Weird.
And then Metropolis was based on Toronto, not New York as commonly believed. To quote 30 Rock, Toronto is just New York without all the stuff. So,
yeah. There's no crime alley there.
Yeah. Early Superman comics were very different than we would come to know them as. Superman was grim, violent, and would often just beat people to death. Like Superman routinely killed people.
Yeah.
He was also the only superhero thing about the entire story. Like usually he would just be fighting like a mugger or like just a random problem on the street.
Street thugs.
Exactly. And then the weirder thing was Superman's early enemies were often not criminals. It was like just sort of like things that sucked in daily life. Superman's early enemies included drunk drivers, rigged prize fights, and dangerous mine conditions.
Oh, like non-neurotypical,
M-I-N-E.
I'm like, he just went around beating up mentally ill people?
Yeah, he was Superman just flying around being like,
come here, you schizophrenic.
Yeah, understand social cues. Bam, 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 bam.
Oh, God, no.
Superman also firmly supported the New Deal. There's one issue where he demolishes slum housing to force the city to rebuild it nicer.
Of course. I mean, that is a comic book tradition. Everyone remembers in the 90s when Bruce Wayne endorsed NAFTA.
But Superman would see a major change in World War II. So Jerry was drafted into the army, but Joe kept on working. And at this point, Superman's an industry. It's no longer these two guys who are kind of like drawing and working on Superman together because they have to make a new issue every month. They have to do the daily run comic, so they're just cranking it out. So they're sort of like the CEOs of Superman.
Yeah.
And so the character kind of started to change and drift. And when Superman got involved with the war effort, this was when we see his powers like really explode.
Oh, okay.
Because before this, he can jump over a skyscraper.
Yeah, because that was the whole thing that like never made sense to me as a kid. I'm like, motherfucker can fly, not just leap a building in a single bound. Like,
leap a tall building in a single bound.
Like he's faster than the fucking Flash in some instances.
Yeah,
like
exactly. Because they needed like, how can Superman destroy a German battleship? He has to be able to fly out to the ocean and shoot it with his heat vision
and see through the side of it to make sure that the Nazis on there.
The X-ray vision came from him catching like spies and saboteurs in America.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, okay.
Yeah. So his
could
power,
see their Nazi uniform under their American uniform.
And so it was like basically every time they kind of were like, how do we make Superman do this? They're like, fuck it, he can fly. You know, it was kind of like lazy writing. And also Superman appeared in a lot of propaganda of the era. All
the superheroes did.
Yeah. But
like keep them flying boys with like Wonder Woman and shit. Yeah.
But Superman was very linked with like truth, justice, and the American way.
Yep.
This is like I found very interesting. Captain America appeared in DC's rival Marvel at roughly the same time, but Captain America actually went out of print in 1950 and wouldn't be written back in until 1964. So Superman was more popular than Captain America in World War II and remained America's favorite American superhero.
Yes.
Yeah. But the behind the scenes situations at, DC Comics was becoming untenable. Jerry and Joe had turned DC into a fucking powerhouse.
Yeah.
It's like the name in comics, but they were getting paid $20 a page. And they had made good money. They had made $6 million.
Yeah.
But that's a fraction of what Superman's worth.
Yeah.
Like,
No. Especially.
This is like if George Lucas was getting paid like minimum wage to direct Star Wars.
Like $1,000 per, like $10,000 a Star Wars.
Yeah, basically, yeah. Like this is their creative baby.
Yeah.
They made the entire thing, and then like the people who just kind of like owned a printing press were like, yeah, just give us your hard work and your idea, and then like. So, it's a pretty strong indictment of capitalism out there.
I get it.
I need to indict capitalism more on this show because, like, most people who listen to podcasts are pretty left-leaning.
Yeah.
So I need to, and apparently, I got to indict capitalism more.
Oh, no, and I mean...
As we go through this, you'll see, but, like, the story of Superman is, like, the ne plus ultra of, like, how creators get fucked.
Yeah.
Of just, like, how people who, like, here's my singular vision that I labored over for decades, and then someone who's like, oh, that's cool. I inherited a radio station from my dad.
Yeah.
So in order for this to be seen by anyone other than your supportive mother, you have to give me all of the rights to this, plus all of the rights to anything you will ever think of. And you have to sign this contract that says, if you look at me funny, I can have you shot in the sun and I'll claim that I made this. And I'm going to be up in the club getting blown by people who love the things you invented. And you're going to be like in a dungeon,
No, comic books, it's wild. The amount of like backstabbing that happens in comics. The creator of Batman is not currently credited as the creator of Batman. And like Stan Lee fucked Jack Kirby over.
Yeah.
And that's like a reason why in the DC universe, like all of a sudden there's like this weird infusion of like wacky ass characters because Jack Kirby just went to DC. So like all of the stuff surrounding like Darkseid and Apocalypse and the new gods that are all like wacky and colorful, that's all Jack Kirby.
Same thing in the porn industry. The actors
Really?
they don't get paid anything. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And in comedy, dude.
Yeah.
I think porn actors and comedians should form like a union together.
That would actually be a solid union.
Because the way that comedy and porn work are very similar.
I don't think sex workers need the dead weight, though.
No, like there should be a union. The union should be like bucket drummers, open mic comedians, like OnlyFans porn people.
Okay.
And then like buskers, like subway buskers.
Okay, this is a reputable lobby.
Yeah, like
their most powerful
crust folk bands should be, Oh, like retired aunts who paint. We should all get it, like, like the people who don't make a lot of important art, but they make a lot of the visible art. It's not good, but it's there. We would
the vestigial art.
Yeah. We'd all have to go on like strike together to be like, we demand that the open mic give us 3 minutes, and that also you pay attention to our crust folk music.
Yes,
and that you stop.
And you bring treats for our dogs that we don't take care of.
And that you stop trying to extrapolate based on the angle of the sun in my window what state I live in when I'm webcamming.
Jesus, that's creepy. Yeah.
That's what people do, man. Because dudes are pathetic these days, man.
Yeah, we are.
Because the internet has made it so easy to be pathetic and go down that wormhole. Yeah. And this is another thing, getting back about like why I kind of despise modern nerd culture, is I feel that it promotes this sort of like learned weakness and like identifying through products.
Yes.
Yeah. Which is another thing that I see.
Well, because in early nerd culture, like it wasn't like, oh, this fits with my brand. It was like, oh, this is me. Like this is me.
This is my haven.
This is yeah.
It's
In the Garage by Weezer.
It's the same thing. The same problem that I have with like the whole like world of like amateur pornography is it's no longer erotic. It's about building a brand. Like
that's pretty, but that's as a result of the fact that the artist gets fucked.
Yeah,
exactly.
So if we had a union, stand-up comedians, like open mic comedians, would feel safe to really tell you what they think about issues. and amateur porn would be free to be genuinely erotic.
That's a union joke. You can't tell that joke without paying union dues.
That's a union boob right there. You gotta, I don't know where this riff is going. But the point of the story is that amateur level art is not respected because it's terrible and doesn't deserve respect.
Sure.
But it should at least act like it's going to be respected by like this podcast, right?
Yeah.
No one listens to this podcast, but I take it seriously.
Yes.
Just like if you are a a homeless crust punk who has like a band that is like a washtub bass and an out of tune guitar,
of course,
you should try to be legit and try to be as out of tune and obnoxious and drunk as possible, because that's what your art form is.
Do as you can. Yeah.
If you're an amateur cam girl, you need to really like try to make it erotic.
Or cam boy even.
Or cam boy. You got to try to nail eroticism. Don't just build the brand. Don't just, it's that careerism that has infiltrated the levels of amateur art that have truly poisoned it.
Yeah.
Which is why, capitalism destroyed Superman. Yeah. So, okay, anyway, Joe and Jerry, they filed a lawsuit in 1947. They didn't really have a good argument because the contract is fucking airtight.
Yeah.
The contract is like a page, and it basically says, we own Superman. But it was broad daylight obvious. They'd just been fucked over. So in 1948, the courts came down against them. So Jerry and Joe left DC and started a new character called Funny Man, but he never really worked out. It only worked for like 2 issues. Their names were removed from the Superman comics, and the duo started to fall on very hard times.
Yeah.
Jerry was unable to find steady work, and Joe had to move in with his mother and started to go blind.
Was he the penciler? Or
yeah,
the writer?
Joe was the artist, and he started to go blind. But it keeps getting funnier.
Funnier, yes. That's exactly the feeling I was feeling.
But even without its creator, Superman continued to thrive. In 1941, Mort Weisinger had become the editor of Superman, and he would run Superman for like 20 years.
Yeah.
And this guy is a fucking gold mine. So Mort he's one of those guys who's just the only business he's ever been in is like the like pulp art level world.
Okay.
He used to be H.P. Lovecraft's agent.
Oh, weird.
Which would just be so weird to be like, HP, what you got for me this week? And he's like, I have a terrifying story of darkness from beyond the galaxy's edge that will haunt and distort your mind in nightmares that you cannot remember, of cyclopean madness. And he's
okay.
I think I can get you like $20 for that. I think I can get you like $20 for that.
Good. Sounds like you're staying creative. That's really all that matters. It sounds like you got some good things that you could go off there.
Yeah. I just
being H.P. Lovecraft's hype man. I just, like H.P. Lovecraft doesn't believe in himself. He's like, I've got this idea for this Cthulhu, but it's
not truly terrifying.
It's not truly.
I just also love the idea of like you trying to like get H.P. Lovecraft work. It was like, look, I know that the ad that you were looking for said that you need someone to write for Good Housekeeping to explain 10 ways
cigarettes are healthy.
10 ways to clean your oven. But I got this guy here who only writes about pyramids in Antarctica that are full of deathless demons from a distant galaxy. And they can probably clean an oven.
Yeah, I feel like he really only gets work ever around Halloween. I don't know. He's like the spirit Halloween stores of pulp writers.
But that's such a good bit of H.P. Lovecraft writing for like Cosmo. Like 14 ancient dark moves from beyond the limits of sanity that will drive your man to inescapable madness. That's a good bit. That's a
great.
good bit. Yeah. So Mort was also obsessed with beauty pageants. In fact, his biggest payday would come when he wrote a novel about a fictional Miss America pageant.
Which was then later adapted into Miss Congeniality.
Yeah,
we all know the story.
He was also famously cheap. He wrote a book called 1001 Things You Can Get for Free, which is just a list of ways to get like free pens by writing to the DMV.
I love it.
Yeah.
Legally, they can't charge you for extra ketchup at the McDonald's.
It sold 3 million copies.
Oh my God.
This dude fucking rules. This dude, he's just like hanging out with Miss Arkansas, and he's like, yeah, I can introduce you to H.P. Lovecraft. What? You don't know who he is? What? He's dead? God damn it. Also, Mort was very good at writing Superman. He always wrote these like very simple, airtight plot structure stories, but he also hated writing Superman.
I would too.
So he actually, when people asked him what he did for a living, he would lie and say he worked for a newspaper.
So he Clark Kented his Superman?
Yeah. He had a secret identity, which was writing Superman. And then
I don't a lot of time. I mean, because comedy has never been my main job, but I do definitely back burner the shit out of that when I meet people.
But also, like, comics were like a low art at the time.
Oh,
so this would be like, because and he's
felt very Gatsby-like.
He's in the world of like New York writers, right?
Okay.
So this would be like if you're at like Berkeley, but you're like in Korn. You're in like Slipknot.
Okay.
Where you're like, I write for an incredibly successful publication, but it's like kind of gross and like low art and like. And back before low art was considered high art and whatever and all that dumb bullshit. But He kept on trying to get fired from Superman by asking for bigger and bigger raises, which he would always get. Which, man, I've never tried that technique, but I hope it works. Mort created many of the details of Superman's world that we know today, like Lex Luthor and Kryptonite. Yep. Kryptonite actually made its first appearance in the Superman radio show. And here was the problem, right? The radio show was performed live, as most radio shows were at the time. And the actor wanted to take a vacation. So Mort tried to think of a solution for, like, how do we make it so the actor playing Superman can take a vacation? How do you write Superman out of Superman? And he realized when he started thinking about his actual favorite superhero, Batman. He liked Batman because Batman is mortal and can get hurt. So Mort invented kryptonite as a way to incapacitate Superman. So the actor could go on vacation and then they could just have like an extra groan and grunt while Superman was lying on the floor in the throes of kryptonite poisoning.
Oh, yeah, that was my favorite episode of the Superman radio show, where it was just an hour long of Lois going, "Are you okay?" And,
I got kryptonite poisoning. And then in the background, you could hear a guy going, "I need more money." Why? Because I know H.P. Lovecraft. Comics in general were thriving, but superheroes were just one genre out of many. At the time, crime and horror comics were very, very popular. Yeah. And they were lurid, violent, and sexual. They were like very low rent entertainment for teens. It was like the guy at your high school who really liked Pantera. Not even like the guy who liked Pantera, the guy who like needed Pantera.
Yeah.
He loved crime and horror comics.
Okay.
Like the kids who had like seen some shit, they were like, "This reflects my world." You know, like
yes.
They loved crime and horror comics. Yeah.
The guy who asked the gym teacher to play Pantera in the weight room. Yeah.
Okay. And like anything that kids like, there was a backlash. In 1954, Dr. Frederick Wortham published The Seduction of the Innocent, which was a book that made some pretty wide-reaching claims about how comic books made kids like evil and depressed. And a lot of this was really bad research. Like 95% of minors read comics. So
Hillary Clinton, video games.
So pretty much any kid who had done anything had read some. And he also did a lot of like incredibly sloppy research. Like he said in his book that children thought Batman and Robin were gay lovers, and that it made adult minor homosexual relationships normal to kids.
Good Lord.
His research consisted of asking one teenage boy who had just been molested if he thought Batman and Robin were gay lovers, which is a bit of a leading question.
Yeah.
That's like if like right after like the worst breakup you've ever been through, a guy was like, "Hey, does Gollum make some good points?" You know, like... So like, you know, it's like, "Hey, I know your wife just got stabbed, but does this Rorschach test, which is just a drawing of your wife getting stabbed, look like your wife getting stabbed?"
Yeah.
But also the thing is, Wortham might have been onto something. So there was this huge, vast underground of all those like crime comics and those horror comics. And there was a legit underground of like kind of like very small publishers who made like really graphic shit. Like there was this thing called the Brooklyn Thrill Killers, who were a bunch of like teenagers who ran around like fucking 1950s warehouses in New York, whipping transients, and then they escalated to setting them on fire.
What the fuck?
And they said they had been influenced by this comic book called Knights of Horror, which is this comic book that's literally just BDSM and like kidnapping and murder stories.
Of course.
Right? And they were like, "Yeah, it was awesome. The comic book told us to do it." In 2009, several comic book historians started to notice similarities between Knights of Horror and Joe's work in Superman.
General style, yeah.
And they also noticed that Joe's next door neighbor worked for the company that published them. So there's pretty good evidence that Joe Siegel, the guy who drew Superman, also at the end of his career, when he was hard up for a paycheck, started drawing like brutal fucking 1950s bondage pornography.
Good Lord. Well, maybe he was just doing it for like Sixers, you know?
He was
like,
doing it for
a neighbor.
Yeah. But that's the other thing. He was like obsessed with bodybuilders. So he drew all of these comics that are like bodybuilders, like tying women up and then like poking them with a stick. And then, you know, because again, like, you know, he's not very good with women. So he's like, "Oh, I hate women. But now I was rich for a minute, so women liked me. But now I'm blind, so I'm mad at women again. I wish I was strong. Jeez. I'm always horny, and I'm blind."
Yep.
Yeah. And there was also a nugget of truth to the book's conclusions about like comic books and weird sexual undertones. Like, for example, we all know, well, maybe we don't all know, but Wonder Woman was created by a swinger with a huge bondage fetish.
Yeah, he was like a rope bondage dude.
Yeah. Which is just so funny because like he invented Wonder Woman to be like, oh, Wonder Woman, I've been bad. Come tie me up and catch me.
Tell the truth.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That same year, Congress established the Senate Select Committee on Juvenile Delinquency. So this was to investigate comic books.
Okay.
The most famous exchange of the hearings occurred between William Gaines, who was the publisher of Mad Magazine and crime suspense stories. He was interviewed by Senator Estes Kefauver about the level of violence in comics. So here's like a little.
Wait, what year was this?
This was, I think, 1955.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So here's the exchange. So the senator, Kefauver, says, here is your May 22nd issue. It seems to be a man with a bloody axe holding a woman's head, which has been severed from her body. Do you think this is in good taste? Gaines. Yes, sir, I do. For the cover of a horror comic. A comic in bad taste, for example, might be defined as holding the head a little higher so that the neck could be seen dripping blood from it, and moving the body over a little further so that the neck of the body could be seen to be bloody.
So that's what Kathy Griffin did wrong.
Kefauver then said, you have a little bit of blood coming out of her mouth. And then Gaines replied, yes, a little.
So just a tiny bit of blood.
Yeah, exactly. In his defense, Gaines had been up all night taking speed. So, gotta make that deadline, baby.
Yeah, that's the fucked up thing about art. Is it pushes a lot of people into like stimulant dependency.
Yeah. Congress started the Comic Code Authority, which asked publishers to sanitize their content. It's also called the CCA. The CCA was voluntary, but it functionally became law. Publishers didn't want to risk public outrage by not submitting to CCA approval. So entire genres of comics were basically outlawed, and horror and crime stories vanished. And the only genre that Congress universally approved of were superheroes, right?
Yeah.
So they soared to the top of the pile. They became synonymous with comics despite the fact they were only one genre in the medium.
Oh.
Yeah.
So this is when that codification or whatever.
Yeah, this is when superhero comics became the only type of
Yeah,
comics.
yeah.
Yeah. Wortham was actually said he was pretty satisfied with the results of the hearing, but he was kind of busy that year, so he couldn't continue his research. That year, he had to go to the Supreme Court to provide scientific evidence supporting the Children in Brown versus Board of Education, arguing segregation was inherently unequal.
Whoa. Yeah, he had a busy year.
He had a busy year. It was like, yeah, Batman and Robin are gay. Also, segregation is wrong. So, yeah.
Batting 500.
Yeah. Batting pretty 500, though.
Yeah, batting pretty 500.
It is also kind of weird that, like, the guy who basically provided, like, the scientific evidence to desegregate schools was doing terrible research. He was just pulling out of his ass.
He just asked, like, the grocer at the corner store, hey, you think segregation's wrong?
Yeah. I mean, based on his methods, basically what he probably did was, like, went to, like, poor black kids who, like, didn't know how to read and was like, hey, do you think Batman is gay? Like, kind of gay, you know?
Who's Batman?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that is just weird, the idea that, like, they were just being like, how do we prove scientifically that segregation is wrong? I know a guy who thinks Batman's gay. Now, the Comic Code Authority, combined with an oversaturated market, led to a collapse. Nearly 3/4 of comic companies went bankrupt. But DC had a bigger problem on their hands. They'd rehired Jerry, but he was still upset about losing the rights to Superman.
Yeah.
The copyright expired in 1965, and Jerry started plotting with Joe to take it back. So when DC found out, they cut Jerry's workload to basically nothing, and he quit in protest. And he would never again would work on a popular comic. Jerry and Joe took DC to court in 1966, and again, their evidence was pretty thin. Can't blame them for trying. Capitalism fucks them over, blah, blah, blah. But they finally lost in 1974. But while the lawsuit over Superman was raging, there was another problem, and it was sort of the beginning of the end of, like, Superman as the most relevant superhero. Vietnam, civil rights movement, counterculture. You know, Superman just stopped working as well. Like,
because their issue with Superman is that they tethered him so hardcore to America.
But it's also like America in a very apolitically patriotic way.
Yes.
Like that,
Whereas,
like World War II.
Captain America becomes disillusioned with America, but still does what's right. But like Superman is like, da, 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 like,
Superman is very closely tied to that whole like World War II, like everyone's son is fighting. We all work at war factories. Like
It's more monolithic.
Yeah, that very monolithic kind of patriotism that's like, I am the representation of all of these good abstract ideas that we are projecting onto ourselves because we're in a war and it's really hard to, think ambiguously in a war. So don't worry, I'm Superman.
Things need to be black and white.
Yeah, but and that just didn't work in Vietnam. That didn't work during the civil rights movement. It doesn't work when people are burning American flags.
Yeah.
And the other issue was that comics were losing ground to television, which started to fill the void as the cheap visual art form of the day. So once television pops off, comics almost immediately start losing their ground as comics today are a very niche element of pop culture. They mostly exist to get made into trade paperbacks, and,
or movies,
or movies. Yeah, exactly. But back then it was this was a podcast. It was something that was in pop culture. It was everyone read them. Everyone liked them. But Superman didn't really change, and they were losing a lot of ground to Marvel Comics.
Yep.
And they couldn't figure out why. The answer was fucking obvious to everyone. Marvel was better drawn with better characters. Yeah. But DC got obsessed with the small details. They thought it was because Marvel had a lot of red on the cover.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, so Superman was like, I'm going on a double date with Lois Lane and Jimmy Olsen and his girlfriend, but oh no, there's crime and I have to fly over, and oh no, kryptonite and Lex Luthor. And then it was just boring and repetitive and no one gave a shit. Superman comics got a huge boost in 1978 with the release of the first Superman movie. Yeah. Which was really the first big budget Hollywood
superhero movie, for sure.
The Superman movie had a very interesting road to production. It took a year to get the rights to make Superman into a movie. So they just decided to make two back to back. So they made two movies at the same time. So that way, if the first one flops, you lose a lot of money on the second one, right?
Yup.
Then once they picked Mario Puzo to write the screenplay, he wrote The Godfather.
He wrote the screenplay?
Well, he wrote the first draft of it. He was paid $600,000 and turned in a 500-page screenplay.
Jesus Christ.
And for
Jimmy Olsen gets shot up at a toll booth. It's actually just a pretty much copy paste.
For reference, 110 is average.
Holy fuck.
You come to me on the day of my daughter's wedding to Superman.
You come to me on today, the exploding of Krypton. Because that's the same fucking actor.
You know
it's Marlon Brando on both sides.
Yeah, you know that no Kryptonian can refuse a favor asked of him on the day of the exploding of Krypton. Oh, Don Jor-El, I only ask you for one thing. That you put my baby in the space capsule and you shoot him towards Kansas.
Oh my God, I love it.
Yeah. So it was also hard to find a director. George Lucas was asked, but he turned it down to work on his weird little passion side project, Star Wars. Yep. Sam Peckinpah was also asked.
Peckinpah?
Yeah.
The Western guy?
Yeah, Wild Bunch. Yeah,
okay.
The guy who used to get blackout drunk and shoot his TVs instead of turning them off.
Okay.
Yeah. He declined due to scheduling issues, and that was sort of polite cover for the fact that he pulled a gun during a production meeting.
Ooh,
hell yeah, that's so cool.
God.
Except not. Casting the lead was also very difficult. It was very hard to find someone who could play Superman. They asked Dustin Hoffman.
Okay.
Al Pacino? I'm Superman here!
Lois!
That's good. That's good. I'm a journalist! Clint Eastwood?
I mean, I see that more than anybody else.
Yeah.
Like, if he could open his eyes more, he would.
Yeah.
He's got the Superman hair in the jaw, but like in the eyes, he's very much more like Batman-y.
Yeah,
like, he deserves a cowl.
Yeah. Robert Redford?
Yeah, I see
almost too good looking.
Yeah.
Almost too good looking to be He's too good natured, but he's too good natured in a fun loving way. Like Superman's always a bit of a prude.
Yep. Yeah. He's very like hoity toity.
Robert Redford has like steal your girl vibes.
Oh,
he has steal your girl energy.
He fucks.
Yeah. Burt Reynolds. Hell yeah.
Yeah. It's a funny suit.
Paul Newman.
Oh, they went with Butch and Sundance.
Yeah. They were like, fuck, try both of them.
I'd love to see a curly-haired Superman.
Yeah.
He's only got curly hair in one spot. That's all he gets.
Yeah. Then Bruce, now Caitlyn Jenner.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah. Because the whole like Olympics thing,
that's
big
wild.
athlete. Yeah.
Holy smokes.
Charles Bronson, fucking Death Wish. Hell yeah.
I am Batman, Superman.
Chris Christopherson was asked. I am here to be Superman in the moonlight. Yep. And then also they asked David Prowse, aka the guy inside the Darth Vader suit.
What?
Yeah.
Weird.
He was asked. Yeah, he was like a
Okay.
bodybuilder.
And he wasn't even Darth Vader at that point because
Yeah.
George Lucas was working on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, he
The
he
guy
tried
in the
out for it.
Chewbacca suit.
Yeah. Here's the weirdest one though.
The guy they put in the R2D2 droid.
Here is the weirdest one that was seriously considered.
Yeah.
Muhammad Ali.
Oh,
Hey, like you know how like America is like just coming out of like
Yeah.
a really violent redefinition of like its racial status quo.
That's wild. Well, 'cause-
And like everyone's kind of exhausted.
Yeah.
What if Superman was a black Muslim?
God damn.
And then also some other actors pushed very hard to get the part. They were like, give me an audition, give
Mm-hmm.
me an audition, including Arnold Schwarzenegger, which was like, Lois, I am Superman.
Whoa.
I am from
Oh.
Sylvester Stallone.
Oh.
Lois!
Yeah.
I just love the idea of Sylvester Stallone trying to be a journalist. Like, oh, so what'd you see with your face or whatever?
I guess really, if you want to see, if anyone listening to this wants to see what Sly Stallone, Clark Kent would look like, look up Tango and Cash.
Ooh,
Because
yeah.
literally, his look in Tango and Cash is like bodybuilder Clark Kent.
And then here's the weirdest one, in my opinion. Another guy who pushed really hard for the role of Superman was Neil Diamond.
I mean, I could see that being big with the
Dude.
tribe. He wanted it to go to a tribes member.
Yeah, Cracklin' Rose fucking slaps, dude. That song fucking Sweet Caroline fucking slaps, dude. Cherry fucking slaps, dude.
You know that there would have, if they went that route, been like a karaoke date scene with
Yeah,
Lois.
yeah,
It was like,
yeah.
you remember the part of Superman where he just sings like "You'll be a woman
Yeah,
soon"?
yeah. The part of Superman where Superman flies up to Lois Lane's window and is like, say it now, say, Cracklin' Rose, you're no. Cracklin' Rose, you're a store-bought woman. But you make me sing like a guitar humming. Yeah, dude, fucking.
Yeah.
That would have ruled.
That
That
would
would have
have
ruled so
That would
hard.
have been sick as fuck.
Dude, when I wrote that line, I just went and started listening to Neil Diamond, and I was like, this guy fucking slaps. This is so good.
Neil Diamond's pretty great.
Craftsmanship,
Yeah.
passion. It's the perfect blend of passion and craftsmanship.
He was huge for a reason.
Which is what, this is what I want this podcast to be. It's the perfect blend of passion and craftsmanship.
Yes.
We're working on one part of that first. They got
passion in spades.
They got so desperate to find an actor for Superman because it turns out that most dudes who look like Superman are terrible actors.
Okay.
Like, I mean, they went through like thousands of actors. Like, you ever seen like Party Down?
Yeah.
Like all the Kyles, all the like,
Oh yeah.
all the guys who are like new in town and like kind of hot and have like today's haircut and the jawline.
Yeah.
And their Superman take is like, I'm Superman, but I have a dark secret. And they're like, next, you know. Yeah. They even screen tested the producer's wife's dentist, like on the off chance he was a good actor. Yeah, the producer's wife was like, my dentist is hot. And then they're like, let's give him a screen test.
That's great.
Eventually, they settled on a mostly unknown Christopher Reeves. He was like a classical actor at the time. He took the role on the advice of his acting teacher, the legendary John Houseman, who said, quote, it is terribly important that you become a serious classical actor. Unless, of course, they offer you a shit ton of money to do something else.
Yeah.
I also, okay.
I'd sell out for Superman. Are you fucking kidding me?
As someone who has been in like the world that involves actors, there is no greater scam in the world than acting coach, acting teacher. Like that is, they just like take your money and are
Why
like,
aren't you acting?
yeah, they just take your money and are like, so, you know, like the thing about your feelings is you have to show them through your method and craft. And they're like, what the, it's no, the biggest scam is comedy classes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, oh God, yeah. Because I remember I got asked to teach a comedy class at University of Washington.
Yeah. Oh, you turned it down?
No, I didn't. I did it, but I was like, do not pay me. And then
Yeah.
I went in and just basically like didn't even give advice on like writing or anything like that. I'm just like, here's how stand-up's gonna be, and here's how you can thrive in it. I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Like, just don't make any noise. Just practice. Be
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
If people throw smoke at you, unless you really deserve it, they're probably just throwing shade.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
Just do good things long enough, and someone will notice.
I am a big believer in the idea that like being funny is essential to stand up.
Yes.
Well, actually, no, not really. Like, but that you're born funny. The best test for finding out if someone is funny is playing dirt bottles with them.
Now, dirt bottle.
Yeah,
you got that dirt
you
bottle.
got the dirt bottles, yeah.
You get that dirt, you put it in the bottle, you get 6 or 7 in a row, and I'm real good at it.
I'm real good at it, yeah.
You're good at it.
Dirt bottles is, for the audience that I hope is still listening, dirt bottles is, well,
It's an improv game?
It's an improv game. I'm gonna have
there we go.
I'm gonna have to cut this part because I'll just
Okay.
ask me in the DMs what dirt bottles
Yeah,
is.
we'll tell you about those dirt bottles.
Because I don't have time to explain
you know
dirt
what?
bottles.
You got to actually go to patreon.com
/ dirt bottles.
dirt bottles, and you got to be a top tier subscriber for Andrew to give you the word on dirt.
I'm so mad that I have to cut explaining dirt bottles. Okay. Christopher Reeves had to beef up for the role, so he started working out with David Prose, the guy in the Darth Vader costume.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah, he would lift weights for 2 hours a day and then jump on a trampoline for an hour and a half. I hope
The
doing
trampoline
the
bit
hands,
I would be...
the hands in the air is like practice flying. Marlon Brando agreed to play Jor-El,
Of course.
Superman's father, on a few conditions. First, they needed to film all of his scenes in 2 weeks.
They needed to bring his food to him in a wheelbarrow.
Yeah.
And he needed a decanter full of whiskey at all times.
Yeah. Well, no, all of his scenes had to be filmed in 2 weeks because he was very busy being fucking high on morphine in Tahiti.
Yep.
Second, he wasn't going to learn his lines beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
Third, they couldn't film any of his scenes in Italy where production was occurring because he had a warrant out for his arrest there on a sexual obscenity charge.
Whoa.
Yeah, because
What'd he do?
Last Tango in Paris features unsimulated sex.
So it was like due to a release. So it wasn't like he got drunk and like...
No, like, so
yeah,
in
yeah,
Italy,
yeah,
I
okay.
think they filmed it in Italy, but they filmed Last Tango in Paris in Italy.
Okay.
I think, or there's,
It's
I don't know,
weird.
but there's a part of that movie where they're fucking and he's actually fucking.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, and so that was the Italians like, "Hey, Marlon Brando, you gotta fake it when you fuck the actress. Hey, that's offensive to the Pope and my 14-year-old wife. Hey.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say that seem like unsimulated sex seems pretty Italian until you bring the Pope into it. Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then also fourth, he needed $3.7 million and 11.75% of the gross just to be in the movie.
11.7.
Yeah. He needed like
over a tenth of the money back on that went to Brando. He got 10 points. Jesus.
Also, Brando pitched the idea of his character just being a talking suitcase or bagel that just explained Superman's past to him rather than show it. Because film is an auditory medium.
Yeah, of course.
Because Marlon Brando just wanted to sit in his in Tahiti and just be like, "Okay, now just do the lines or whatever. Do the voiceover. It was Superman. You do it better than me.
Thank you. I try.
Yeah, you're Superman because you're from space. Anyway, I'm gonna get back to molesting everyone in Tahiti. I could only do this
wandering
accent
around like the fucking hog at the end of Apocalypse Now.
Yeah. The movie went on to make $300 million at the time, which is insane.
Good God.
And it restored Superman to the forefront of American superheroes.
Yeah.
It was the first big budget, serious superhero movie of any kind. Like everything before that had been pretty corny, pretty like slapdash. So this is the first time where there's like money and legit screenwriters and guys like Marlon Brando. This is the first like marquee, superhero movie. And the issue did bring one pretty key issue to light. Jerry and Joe, who should by all rights be rich and well respected, were living in obscurity and poverty. The half-blind Joe, when he wasn't drawing bondage pornography, was working as a delivery guy. And one day he delivered a package to DC Comics.
He was Postmatesing?
He was, and the CEO.
Oh, no.
The CEO took him aside, gave him $100 and told him to get a new job.
Fuck that dude!
Yeah, he was like, "This is so embarrassing for me that you're poor.
That I fucked you out of your house and home.
How dare you be poor after I made you be poor?"
It's really bad for Superman's image to be affiliated with poor people.
Look, I know that you invented Superman, and I respect and appreciate that. But if you could just die so that you would no longer have your smell in this room, I would appreciate it. But DC fans rallied, and a lot of the DC staff thought it was fucked up, so they were able to get the duo a lifetime pension. 4 more Superman movies were made with Christopher Reeves, all making a lot of money, including one with
Two of which were good.
Yeah, including one with Richard Pryor.
Yeah, that was the one that was really bad to the point where it was good.
Yeah, which is double insane because according to Quincy Jones, Richard Pryor had an affair with Marlon Brando. The Superman comic started lagging behind in the new world of comics again because the 80s and 90s were like grittier.
Yep.
And it was also focused on more independent releases and like artsier.
Yep.
Wolverine, Punisher were like thriving and like Superman's still hella cheesy. The comic industry also underwent a major shift because in the 80s and 90s, newsstands basically went away.
Yeah.
So comics moved from newsstands to like specialty comic book stores. So they stopped being like general pop culture and instead were like items marketed to like collectors, niche hardcore fans. Yeah. They did have a lot of series in the 80s and 90s that were like pretty critically acclaimed. Crisis on Infinite Earths,
Yes.
which is insane because it's literally like them trying to clear out like 60 years of incredibly complicated comic book. Yeah.
No, DC has that like every 20 or 30 years they have to like be like, okay, so here's everything from the past 50 to 70 years of comics, and now here is the unified version of it.
Yeah,
they did it with Rebirth. Yeah.
Then like also the issue is comics were getting like much more fucking artistic and sophisticated, like Dark Knight Returns and fucking Mouse and Watchmen and shit. And Superman got a soft reboot with this series called what is it, Man of Tomorrow or Man of Steel?
Man of Steel.
Yeah, they got a soft reboot. Alan Moore wrote Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, which Alan Moore is a fucking snake worshipping lunatic, but he did. Have I ever told you my great Alan Moore story?
No.
Okay, this is fucking hilarious. So I love Alan Moore. I loved him, especially when I was like late high school, early college.
He's written a lot of great stuff.
Yeah, I loved fucking Swamp Thing and like all the other like
League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Yeah, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, so fucking good. That movie is terrible.
Oh, I know.
But,
I just rewatched it.
And I got super pissed when V for Vendetta and Watchmen came out because I was doing the whole like, now other people know a thing that I like.
Yeah.
Which, you know, is pretty dumb, but it's pretty par for the course.
It's pretty par for that age, yeah.
When I was like a freshman in college at Western was when Watchmen was coming out, and like cool English professors were like, hey, let's read Watchmen because it's a postmodern graphic novel. Yeah. And Shakespeare was like the ultimate rapper, right? Like that kind of shit.
Yeah.
And so I had the hots on this girl on my dorm floor, and she was like, yeah, I got, I'm in this class and we were assigned to read Watchmen. And I was like, oh, you can just borrow my copy so you don't have to buy another one. You know, because the classic, if you lend someone to something, then they have to talk to you again move.
Of course.
You know, not like, it's a pretty standard I like you move.
Yes.
Is I will lend you something
small
so you have to come back. Yes, it's a very sort of like, this way you have to see me again and I can be wearing nicer clothes.
It's like when you put a dollar bill on a fishing line.
Yeah.
Hook it in someone's hand and reel them in so they have to talk to you.
Yeah. But, and then she read it and she was like, yeah, it was really good. I liked it. And I was like, oh yeah, I have a couple other things the guy wrote. And I just lent her my copy of From Hell.
Oh.
Yeah. That is
that's the Jack the Ripper one, right?
Yeah, that's the Jack. That is the Jack the Ripper murdering the shit out of prostitutes.
Bunch of ladies, yeah.
Yeah. That's also the one where like the main character gives a graphic explanation about how we can't like allow women to ever realize they have sexual magic with a K or else it'll destroy civilization. Yeah, it's and he's like,
that's something you want to give to somebody.
And it's all about like Freemasonic conspiracies and shit. And there's like it's insanely graphic and violent.
Yep.
And there's just like all these like weird dream sequences and tons of like totally non-censored hardcore Victorian like gutter sex in it.
Gutter sex.
Yeah. Anyway, she was not a fan of me after that, and I blame Alan Moore for that.
Yeah.
But in my defense, that chick was kind of goth. So
yes.
Anyway, DC killed and resurrected Superman in 1995, which most serious comic fans saw as a publicity stunt, but one that worked pretty damn well.
Yeah.
By the 90s, Jerry and Joe had died. You know, that was over. But it was not the end of their legal troubles. Both of their heirs were asked by DC to sign over any and all rights to Superman for super serious this time. Don't sue us again. In exchange for recognition of the work the guys had done and an annual stipend. So they were like, we will allow your father's name to be on the thing he invented, and we'll give you $10,000 a year if you agree to never, ever, ever, ever mention that your dad invented Superman.
Jesus Christ.
This was also complicated by the fact that the copyright on Action Comics #1 was due to expire, subject to renewal. So if it was renewed for another 20 years, so they could file a claim when it expired in like 1995 or something. And then when DC filed for renewal of I don't understand
There'd
copyright
be like
laws.
A litigation.
Yeah. You know, the law, because you get the verdict, there's the VIG of the flux capacitor.
The juries and the
quantum jury.
Of course.
That is the thing. Yeah, Joe's heir took DC to court for half while Jerry's family like took the stipend. And then this lasted until 2001 when Mark Toberoff, who's this Hollywood lawyer who he specializes in like suing intellectual property that someone else like has a right to. So like if you're the guy who's like Led Zeppelin stole my song,
he's your lawyer.
Here's your lawyer. Yeah.
Okay.
So he took DC to court. He convinced both of them to take DC to court. They were going to get the rights to Superman and give him the rights to Superman to make a movie.
Oh wow!
So this is like an elaborate coup where Mark,
the lawyer was trying to get the rights?
The lawyer was saying, "I will do this on spec. I will be your lawyer for free if you give me the rights to Superman when we sue and get it back."
Whoa!
The rights to the movie. So you get all the comics and everything, but I get them. Yeah, I get a movie out of it. Yeah. Damn. The case took from 2001 to 2016 with a very complicated settlement. Now they have to acknowledge Joe and Jerry's contribution and everything.
Yep.
But here's the thing. Action Comics #1 will finally, for 100% for good, finally enter the public domain in 2033. But Superman will remain copyrighted.
Yeah.
So that means that in 2033, everyone will be free to make anything featuring anything that appears in Superman except for Superman.
So including Lex Luthor,
Lois
Jimmy
Lane,
Olsen,
Kryptonite, Metropolis, everything except Superman. Because fuck everything. Okay, so nowadays superhero movies are a big thing.
Yes.
And Superman has not really landed well in the era of tentpole franchises.
No.
It just, mostly because no one at DC knows how to tell a story.
It's it's also like a hard, like, the fun in Superman is like how powerful he is.
Yeah.
And he is such a goody two shoes where it like can't be like they did a little bit in Man of Steel where they were like blowing through buildings and shit. But like that's the fun shit of Superman is watching all of his powers play out. And it's like,
but that's the problem.
Here's the shit.
Here's the problem with fucking Superman, right? Is like you're like, okay, we're DC movies. We got to make a superhero action movie. Nope. So you make a movie, it's like, then he punches him through a skyscraper, and then he throws him through a wall. And it's just like, this just gets boring, because you know it's all animated.
Yep.
But the real drama of Superman is like him being a kid, him discovering his powers, him like interacting with the world, his secret identity. That's why the first Superman movie's so good.
Well, that's why there were fucking 300 however many seasons of Smallville.
Which works great, which is a good show.
Because he was learning how to be it, but like... It's like watching, like I was saying, like watching fucking Zeus go get groceries. It's like not fun. Yeah. It's like, okay, cool.
It's like watching someone play video games and not even like good video games. It's video games with very bad sound mixing. I saw Batman versus Superman and I was just like, this is
Jesus Christ.
It's very bad, right?
Good portrayal of Bruce Wayne, terrible portrayal of everything else.
Yeah. Well, it's because no one knows how to tell a story anymore except for like me and James Elroy and the guys from Red Letter Media. Shout out. But like DC franchises have floundered a bit. They're still making money, but
honestly the thing that sucks is that I feel like Marvel lets DC be the guinea pig and everything, where like they let them make superhero movies first, and so it was like DC sold off the rights to all their characters to production houses, and Marvel held all the rights. They sold off Spider-Man, the X-Men, that's it. So that when they came around to making movies, Avengers. They could do a fucking group universe. And it's like, we only like a couple of years ago got a half thought out Justice League. When like that's what we should be getting all the time.
It's Superman doesn't work anymore because the problem is that our culture has changed to the point where we can't believe the goody two shoes thing. But our culture has also changed to the point where the idea of like using such a massive character to do like an intimate character study doesn't really work anymore. Because like, what are you going to do? Are you going to go to like Zack Snyder and all of the fucking coked out goons who run movie studios and be like, here's my idea. It's where Superman is like, he's just kind of like new in America and he's trying to make friends and he realizes that like he's so powerful that he hurts people when he touches them. And it's sort of a metaphor for like learning to overcome domestic abuse. And they're like, how about he throws fucking Scarecrow through a black hole in the center of the universe?
How about he and Batman have a mom with the same name?
Oh, that's a genius idea.
Compelling.
I am Shakespeare. Anyway, you guys want to go to another secret pedophile island that no one's going to know about for 35 years?
Oh, God.
Anyway, I don't know. You got any final Superman takes?
Yeah, my final Superman thoughts. I don't know. Crazy awesome for what like it was to spearhead into comic books, but like much like everything, the first shot is oftentimes like the most well-known, but not the best thought. Like,
yeah.
There's no legs to Superman. I feel like so many more characters in the DC house are more compelling.
Yeah. Batman, way more compelling.
Flash is
Spider-Man,
more compelling.
way more compelling. Yeah.
It's Marvel, but sure.
Okay. I don't know. I don't know what
I'm
things
sorry.
are.
I can't do that.
Chewbacca, way more compelling.
Of course,
I think
Chewbacca's
Chewbacca is a better character than Superman.
Chewbacca's technically Marvel.
Superman is a weird part of American folklore. He enjoys decent pull in a second-tier but profitable franchise. I can't say he's ever meant anything to me on a personal level, and I don't think he's a huge deal to kids on the streets today. In American society, the only society in the world which seeks to have some kind of meaning, Superman is a symbol of raw, godlike power in the hands of a decent person who only uses it for good. And that idea lives on, but we can't truly fully believe it. We have to add some grit or some dirt or make the movie all dark and rainy because the average American walking down the street can't really believe in that anymore. And it's hard to say if we're wiser for casting skeptical glances at such a vision or if we have truly lost something that once made an idea so powerful. Henry, you got anything you want to plug?
You have a podcast. Yeah, you should definitely check out the Play Me Out podcast. It's a weekly, once I get it up and running again, podcast where I interview people about music and the process of grief.
Ooh, that's very the opposite of this.
It's very the opposite of this, but I do try. I feel like the humor, it is a lot more kind of like black humor where it's like talking about fucked up stuff and seeing how hard we can laugh about it.
Yeah, that's fun. That's fun. Wait, do you have any episodes that coming out? Are you backlogged?
I'm not backlogged, no,
okay.
so I don't have any coming out. I gotta either start breaking quarantine
or getting digital.
Or getting digital.
You should probably just go digital.
No, digital for don't break. If this is even makes it into the episode, don't break quarantine, dipshit. Stay in. Don't kill people.
Actually, wait, do you got any social media you want to plug?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram at Henry_Hawker. The Hawk's Nest. And then Instagram, search Henry Stoddard. I'm pretty sure that's at Henry _Hawker.
Yeah. Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
And I just want to say, everyone, thank you so much for listening. Coast Guard, thank you so much for your service.
Yes.
We salute you and only you. When I stand for the anthem at a football game, which I do, I wake up every day and play the national anthem and stand for it. I am only thinking about you and how cool you are. I just want to thank everyone out there so much for listening. Hope you're staying healthy out there. Try to avoid, Corona, because if any of you get sick, it'll damage,
numbers will go down.
I don't have that many listeners. I don't have that many listeners. So if any of you get sick, I'm losing my audience. No, I'm just gonna get real here. I got a lot of family that works in the medical field, so I really appreciate seeing so many people like wearing masks, washing their hands, quarantining, taking this shit seriously. And if you're one of those people who's like, oh, it's just like the flu, you have a responsibility to avoid getting sick, quarantine's done, I will fucking murder you. I will murder you to honor. Mother's Day is coming up. I did not get my mom anything for Mother's Day. For Mother's Day, I'm gonna beat the shit out of some fucking Oakley wearing sunburnt uncle. It's
beat
just a bad flu.
Off your face, baby.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm really angry about all those Michigan people. It really upsets me when cops don't shoot the right people.
Oh God.
I don't know. I'm not gonna cut this part. I'm brave. I'm gonna not cut this part.
You're brave.
I'm very brave. Find us on Instagram as kings_of_democracy. That's pretty much the only social media. I stopped doing Twitter because Twitter is just an infinite reserve of dumb takes, and Facebook is the suburbs of the internet.
It is.
Please, leave us a review. We need reviews. We love it when you review us. Leave us a review, 4 stars and up. If you didn't like this podcast but listened all the way through, go fuck yourself. We don't want to hear about your opinion. But if you did like it, we do like you, and I want to hear about you.
Yes.
And then tell your family and friends. Get a face tattoo with our names on it.
Yes.
That's just
you get to download the podcast for free for the rest of life. If you, it's a free podcast, but you still get to download it for free if you get it tattooed.
Everyone out there, just remember to keep praying for Jerry. He's fine, but he could just always use prayers.
Prayers up.
And Shrek Testicles. Pray for Shrek Testicles. So everyone, okay, that's going to do it for us today. I'm Andrew Merklinghouse.
And I'm Henry Russell Stoddard.
And democracy doesn't work. All right. Hey, that ran a bit long, but that was pretty fun.